So hi everyone, I'm Dr. Melissa Louise. As you just found out, we are both Middlesex County College people. So just a little quick introduction about myself. So I'm the Education Degree Program Coordinator here. I'm also a faculty member as well. But my personal background is I'm a former school psychologist, and I also have a degree in educational psychology. So a lot of the things that we're going to be kind of teaching you today and going through with you today come from learning theories. So, exactly as, I'm sorry, what is your name again?
Melanie.
Melanie. Just exactly as Melanie said, we're going to be kind of building on some of the things that Todd actually went over earlier today. So our hope is that, a lot of the things that we give you today can be used in your actual classroom. So this is application kind of stuff. And Dr. Martiney?
I'm Dr. James Martiney. I'm in the Natural Sciences Department, biology side. I did research for many years. Then I started teaching. I thought I knew how to teach, and then realized how horrible I was at it. And for the last several years, I've been getting, hopefully, better and better. So now one of my interests is to figure out how to teach and how the students learn. So that's how we ended up collaborating in this project.
Okay, so are we ready to get started? So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn this into a microbiology classroom. Who's ready to run? Right, I know. We were talking about this. When I was a freshman in college, I was like, I have never even heard of that term, until actually I met you. So anyway, we're going to morph into students. So what we're going to ask is that you do what you would think you need to do when you're in a classroom trying to learn the material. Now, we did give you guys a note page, so you can open up your packet to the first page. But don't go any further, though, just because there are things we're going to do to try to kind of show you what working memory is, okay?
Anybody need one?
Everyone's got one? So the very first, second page in is a note page for you guys. Feel free to take notes. Do whatever you think you need to do, because there will be some quizzes. All right?
All right, so let's start. Alright, so let's start. So here's the scenario. You are in a entry-level microbiology course. You have learned about microbes and infectious diseases, and now we're learning about immunology, which is what your body does when it comes and encounters an infectious organism. So that's your background. So we've been talking about that for a long time. So now let's morph and voila. Okay? So we were talking about this word antigens. That's what we call something that comes and is perceived as foreign by your immune system. Your immune system will respond to it, and it will start the immune response. It is not a normal constituent of the body. Means anything that is not food is going to be seen as an antigen. Okay? Foreign cells and large complex molecules over 10,000 molecular weight, like this one here. I'm sure you can see it perfectly. That polysaccharide. That will be very antigenic. Okay? Some very large antigens will have several epitopes or antigenic determinants. They are a small molecular group that is recognized by lymphocytes, those white blood cells that we learned about last week. Here you see an example, a very large molecule with a lot of epitopes. I'm sure you can see each one of them. Okay? Once you have a large antigen like this, and it has many antigenic determinants, your immune system will recognize this and will mount an immune response. One of the key molecules that you make through an immune response is a molecule called the antibody molecule, seen here. So let's meet the antibody molecule. Here it is. It's beautiful, right? It is also called immunoglobulins. Okay? It is a large Y-shaped protein. It has 4 polypeptide chains. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 light chains, 2 heavy chains. It has 2 fragments here, antigen binding fragments. It has a constant fragment down here. It has a complement binding site. This is the part that binds to various cells and molecules of the immune system. That port right there. It has disulfide bonds, and it has a hinge region. It's a very beautiful, important molecule for you to learn. Okay? So what happens when this molecule gets together with the antigen? So this is what happens. A lot of very interesting things. The principal antibody activity is to unite with the antigen, to call attention to or neutralize the antigen for which it was formed. And here are some examples. You can have antibodies surrounding a virus that is called neutralization. The antibodies fill the surface receptors on a virus or the active site of a microbial enzyme or toxin to prevent it from attaching to the cell. You keeping track of all this? Yeah. You can also have opsonization, which is the process of coating microorganisms or other particles with specific antibodies. You see them here. Okay. So they are more readily recognized by phagocytes, other types of white blood cells you learned about last week. And here's a final example of a bacteria that's been tagged with those antibody molecules that you saw this. Okay? I'm sure everybody took wonderful notes and you're ready for the first quiz. Right? Here we go.
Okay, so what you can do is in your second page after the note page is your quiz. Of course, flip back and forth if you need to use your notes, but do the best that you can. But the only thing is don't go any further in the packet to look for information, okay? That's all we're asking. Just use your notes. About 3 more minutes. About 2 more minutes. Everyone ready? Okay, everyone done with the quiz?
Yes.
Okay. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to do another simulation. So we're going to give you the quiz answers in a little bit. So morph back into yourselves as students, do whatever you need to do to understand the material.
All right, so now we're going to be looking at a specific example of the interaction that we just spoke about. Now, when I think of December, I think of very important things like the new Star Wars movie, right? But also the influenza or the flu season. So let's see what happens when you're exposed to influenza. Okay, here is a picture of the influenza virus. We spoke about viruses a couple weeks ago. Okay, selfie. So these molecules sticking out of the influenza virus are called spikes. We spoke about that one already. Those are the antigens. I want you to remember that. The antigens in the influenza virus are called hemagglutinin. That's a big word, so let's call it H instead. And neuraminidase. That's a big word, so let's call it N for now. So H and N are the 2 antigens of the influenza virus that I want you to know. Okay? Something else that we spoke about is when the influenza virus is exposed to you. Hopefully I don't have the influenza, that was a fake one. But if I had influenza, that means all of you are breathing in this thing right now. So, of course, you don't want to get sick. So what's going to happen is that the influenza virus has to get inside your cell, okay, in order for you to get sick. And guess what it uses? It uses those H and N's. It uses those antigens. It uses those antigens to bind to a specific part of the cell called the receptor so it can get into the cell and make you sick. Okay? The analogy I want you to think of is a key and a key lock. So the antigens, H and N's, are the keys that the virus uses to get inside your cell. Okay? And this will be the little lock in the door. So now I sneeze, you breathe in my virus. Hopefully, no, this is just a simulation, don't worry. Okay? So now what's your immune system is going to do to prevent this interaction? So let's go back to that beautiful molecule, the antibody molecule. It is very complex, but I only want you to understand one part of this molecule today, just one part. And that is the arms, okay? Those of you who like to do the YMCA at weddings, don't worry, I want to make you do that right now. You're doing actually the antibody molecule, okay? These arms are called the fragment antigen binding, if they bind the antigen, okay? They actually bind it right here. So you have those arms going up, is your hand, the one that grabs to the antigen, okay? So what happens is that your immune system makes this molecule, the molecule looks around doing the YMCA, and is looking for the antigen. When it finds these antigens, what are these antigens called again? H and N. He finds them and he grabs to them. So let's say that you're trying to get into your car and I grab to your key. I'm not going to do this, don't worry about it. But if I grab your hand and I grab your key, can you unlock your car? No, of course not. Okay? So let's see what happens when you're exposed to the virus. You make the antibody molecule. Can the virus get into the cell and get you sick? Okay? And the answer is no. Okay? Here's what's going on. Here's the virus again. What are the antigens again? H and N. Now you have the antibody molecule, those arms with the hands, grab into the antigen. Now you cannot get into your car. You cannot get into the cell. So is this person going to get sick? No. No ability to get in. The fancy term that we use for this process is neutralization. Okay? By the way, if you understand this, you understand how your flu shot works. Okay? Those of you who got your flu shot, actually I should say now, I think 5 of you got your influenza shot. Which 5 of you got it? This is what you're getting. You're getting those H and the N's. You're getting those antigens in the flu shot. Your immune system makes the antibodies, and then I can sneeze all I want. You will not get sick. And that's how you get protected by your immune system from influenza.
Can I play a student role? Because I've had to do this.
Yeah.
So, why is it that the flu shot doesn't work?
You
My
have to.
doctor tells me not to get the flu shot.
There's two common answers to that, and I can talk more about that later. But the shortest, the easiest one is that this process takes about 2 weeks to happen. So if you take your flu shot today, you're sick tomorrow. It's not that the flu shot didn't work; you took it too late. That's why you have to get your flu shot in October. But I'll talk more microbiology with anyone down the road.
Okay, we ready?
Are you ready for the next quiz?
Yes.
Here we go.
So it's the second page after your first quiz. So go for it. About 2 more minutes. About 1 more minute. Is everybody done? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're now going to give you the correct answer. So you guys are going to grade yourselves, okay? So we're going to start with the first quiz. So we're going to go back to the first quiz. Okay, James, what's the answer for the first one? Quiz number 1.
That would be C, the antigen binding site.
Okay, so if you got a C, you get 1 point. Okay.
Don't ever do that.
What does the term FC stand for?
That
Somebody
is
said-
fragment constant.
Okay, Okay, so if you put fragment constant, you get another point. Okay? All right, last one. You want to give us the range of correct answers.
You can say neutralization. You can say preventing the virus from getting to this inside the cell. You can say opsonization.
Okay. So if you did any of those three, you give yourself a point. Okay?
Opsonization only half a point. It's not quite correct.
So add up your score. Just put it on the top so you know how you did on that one. Okay, let's go to the second quiz now. We'll give you the correct answers for this quiz. Okay, the first one for the multiple choice.
That'll be antigen, B.
B. Okay? All right, what does the term MAB stand for?
Fragment antigen binding.
Okay, give yourself a point. And then give us the range of answers for how vaccines work.
Neutralizing viruses, preventing viral entry into the cell.
Or the key unlocks the system.
Alice,
Yeah, you can do
question?
that. You can do blocking the key from getting to the keyhole. Yeah.
Alice,
Can
question.
we say something about the Y hands grabbing something?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yes.
I'd still be in school.
And grabbing the antigen.
So add up the points on your second quiz. Okay? Get your number in your head on how you did on the first one versus the second one. Is everyone ready? You know how you did? Okay. Who did better on the first quiz versus the second quiz? Who did better? We have 1, 2.
Well, she's a biologist. That's
You don't count. Sorry. Are you a biologist? Okay. You're a good listener. Okay, who did better on the second quiz versus the first quiz? The majority. And did anyone score the same? Just a couple. Okay. So let's talk about this now. I know some of you might have done better on the first versus the second, and a couple of you did well on both or the same. Why do you think you did better on the second quiz versus the first quiz? Because we didn't really do anything different, did we?
I had prior knowledge by the time we started talking about the second piece.
Okay.
So it was easier for me to make the connection and understand what
What was going on?
about.
Yes. Okay, so you used some prior knowledge that helped you on the quiz.
The second time around, it was much clearer and specific, and he kept saying, "This is what I want you to."
Okay. Yeah.
This is what I want you to get. So
Okay.
it's more.
It was more specific. Okay, another one over here.
The second quiz allowed for more general answers on the third question, whereas the first one wanted specific words with an answer for the third question.
Okay, I mean, they both want, there's a range.
And there was a range, but
Yeah.
the options that he gave as being acceptable for the first one were very limited, whereas the third one, he was accepting many variable
Okay,
answers.
okay. Alice?
In the first one, my anxiety level went up immediately when you kept saying the first words out of your mouth were about what we learned last week. And I was like going, what did I learn last week? What did I learn last week? So I was really trying to put myself in the role of a student.
So you started feeling anxious.
In the second one, you said something that I was able to write down, even though I had no idea what you were talking about, because you said, I want you to remember this one
Right.
thing.
Mhm.
And so that was like, okay, I can do,
You
I
can
can
do
remember
that.
one thing. That's good.
Yes. Okay, so he's being specific. Okay, a couple more.
The first one, he went just through it, he just lectured.
Yeah.
And there was no engagement. The second one, you were more engaging. You look back, you had made a couple of jokes, and also you relate something that it was a key and I love was very interesting. So I was actually, the first one, I was keep writing. The second one, I wasn't writing, I was listening to you, and I just.
And then maybe writing
keyboard.
key points down?
Yeah, just
Okay.
wrote the keyboard.
Okay, is that the same thing like
Yes, for the second one, I was able to relate more with the example with the vaccine,
Yeah.
getting
Getting your flu
sick. So
shot,
by the time
yeah.
I was thinking, I was like, oh, that's important, and start making it applicable to my life. So it was
Yeah.
easier to take notes as he was going
Just
through
going
that.
through it, okay.
Honestly, he was talking so fast that I really could not understand, so I found myself trying to look at the pictures to get what he was saying, but I couldn't see the images. So because I'm a visual learner, I could not really get what he was saying verbally, because he was talking very fast. I was trying to connect with the pictures, but I couldn't really see some of the images, so it was very difficult to follow in general. So I was just writing down words, but it didn't make any sense to me.
But maybe if you were sitting closer, the pictures might have been beneficial for you.
Probably.
To see those, right?
Right,
Yeah,
because when he
because you
said,
said that you really are
because he was
enhanced with
using
your
letters
visual.
like HC, but he pointed to the picture, so I was trying to see if something on there with an HC, and I couldn't get it, so, yeah, my brain was like not doing well.
That's okay.
Well, I took a picture of the picture.
Yeah.
I used it to take the quiz, so I wouldn't let your student do that with you.
I don't think you
You
should do
didn't say I
that.
couldn't use
Go
those.
out yourself.
We didn't say don't take pictures.
I'd say use more analogies the second time, and if you look at your slide deck specifically, you pulled the verbs and the words off, so before where the focus is, what am I seeing, what is this reading, these very technical terms. You've instead focused on using the pictures to tell the story to complement the analogies we're going with.
Yes. Okay. So that's kind of really why we wanted to put you in that anxious, sorry Alice, situation, because that's really the premise of what we're going to be talking about today with you guys, is really the delivery of information when we are teaching. Now I'm going to say this, and I know Todd already said it too, that obviously students have a responsibility in their learning. There is no doubt. And research shows and learning sciences show that learning comes from the learner. Okay, and I'm going to use a really nasty, kind of gross analogy now, but remember, shocking. We, as teachers, do not have a chainsaw, and we are not going to chainsaw open a head and dump the knowledge in. And I always tell that to my students. That's not my job, okay? Your job is to show up and be ready to learn. But then, as a teacher, it's our job then to create an experience that enhances that learning. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So one of the things that I think is crucial and that we've discussed in our own, many discussions about this, is the concept of working memory. And you guys have already saw a little bit about this today with Todd, because he put up a slide with that. And some of you may have a background in psychology or education, so working memory is probably familiar to you. But we are going to talk about what it is and how it is absolutely crucial to the learning process. And as educators, if we don't enhance working memory, we are going to shut down learning. Okay? So that's what I'm going to jump in now and talk about. So, what is working memory? Okay, so maybe just a textbook kind of idea. If you already know what it is and you know what I'm talking about, if not, it'll be sort of a refresher. So what we know about working memory is it's literally a temporary storage area. It only lasts about 15 or so seconds. Okay, it doesn't last very long. And I know that sounds scary because as a teacher, you're up here, or as a professor, you're teaching, you're like, so we got 15 seconds, and then what's going to happen after that? So it is a it's not like long-term memory. It's not a place where things are stored for long periods of time. So we want to keep that in mind, that it is not a place where things are going to stay. However, this starts to occur. This is where active processing starts to take place. Okay? Now I'm going to ask you guys a question. Think back to your college years. Okay? Let's say you're at a party and you want to get somebody's phone number. Okay? You don't have a cell phone. No cell phones. Okay? What are you going to do to remember their phone number?
Memorize it.
How? How are you going to memorize it?
Repeat it.
Okay, you're going to repeat it. Okay. Can't write it down though. That's kind of, you don't want to write it down. And you don't want to write it on your hand either because that's kind of tacky, right? You're walking around with somebody's phone number on your hand. No. What else are you going to do? You're going to repeat it. What else?
Association.
Oh, maybe association. Maybe chunk it. Is it easier to remember, let's say 4769 as 4769? Yeah. So maybe you're going to chunk it. What else are you going to do? You want to call that person, so you got to remember it. What else? Make it into a song, a jingle or something, right? That's also very helpful. All of those things that we just gave examples about, those are all where you start to actively process the information. So the information comes into the sensory memory, as you know, or the short-term memory, and it's not, it just comes in, and then it's our job to do something with it. And if we don't do something with it, it goes bye-bye. So if you don't chunk it, you don't repeat it, you don't make a jingle, oh well, you don't get to call a person next day. Okay? So you want to think about learning that way. If we're giving information to students, if they don't do something with it, it's not going to stick. It's going to be lost very quickly. Okay? And you can also think of working memory as kind of what you're thinking about. It's an active thing. It's not a passive thing. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about a widely respected theory in working memory. And that's why we want to kind of give you that background knowledge about what this is. So Alan Badley created this model of working memory back in the 70s, and it was part of the whole cognitive movement, and he was an educational psychologist. And this model really helps us to kind of understand how working memory works, okay? So what I want you to do now is I want you to take your hands and put them up like this, okay? I want you to start moving them in circles, okay? Now, can anybody move one hand quicker than the other? Try doing that. Now, if I were to take your picture, do you guys see? We're all over the place. Look around. Look at your peers. I mean, it's a hot mess, right? You got one hand going here, one hand going there. You don't want to hit the person next to you, please. No violence, okay? That is Badley's model. So I'm going to kind of explain how your hands are gears and how they work, okay? So as we know, information is going to come in through your senses, all right? Does anyone know the two senses we use the most when we're learning? Eyes and ears. Yes, exactly. And it kind of throws out that learning style thing, that whole learning style phenomena that we love talking about. That's, learning styles does not match actually how your working memory works. Information is going to still come in your eyes if you like it or not. It's going to come in your ears if you like it or not. But the thing is they have to work together. So although you may prefer one way over the other, both senses have to work. Okay, so let's talk about it. Information comes in. We know that the student has to pay attention. That's their responsibility, okay? But once the information comes in, you've got your two gears, your two hands. That's your phonological loop and your visuospatial sketchpad. So your visuospatial sketchpad processes information through vision, through the eyes. So when students are seeing stuff, that gear starts to go, okay? Phonological loop, what do you think this is processing? Your what? Listening. Yeah, things that come in auditorily. So again, things are coming in, your gears are going to start moving. Now, what's interesting, I want to throw this out there really quickly. Remember, I think, Todd mentioned this, the idea of prior knowledge, okay? Your information from long-term memory, what the student already knows, it is essential to working memory. It's the grease or the oil that makes those gears spin. So not only do you have to think about what you're saying and how you're teaching to a student, you also want to think about what they already know, because that is important. That's going to, kind of slurp it up into the system and help the gears to move. Now, there's two other, parts of the working memory. You can think of the central executive as the boss. It's the person, or the part of working memory that oversees it, that makes sure the gears are spinning correctly, that not too much information is being pulled from long-term memory or not too little. So it kind of oversees the whole process. And then you have your episodic buffer. You can kind of think of that person as the assistant. Okay, they're giving information, they're bringing the oil up, they're telling the central executive what's going on, but they're also communicating with your gears as well. Okay? So according to Badley, information comes in through your eyes and your ears, and this is when you start to actively process it. And what we're going to be talking about today are ways that you can enhance the delivery of your instruction to enhance the working memory of your students. Okay, so that's what we're going to come to in a sec. Now, we're going to have some fun. Let's play a memory game. Let's put working memory to work. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is put down your pens. No taking pictures, sorry. No cheaty. Okay, I'm going to show you a list of words. And it's going to be active for about the same amount of time that your working memory would be active, okay? Now again, there's always ranges in everyone's memory. Everyone knows that we have individual differences, okay? But this is for the average working memory. So I want to see if you can remember how many words you remember, okay? Everyone ready? Here you go. Okay, write down as many as you can. All done, just put your pens down. Okay, is everyone ready? So I'm going to show you the list again, just count how many you got correct. Okay, does everyone have a number? Everyone knows how many you got correct? Does anyone need me to put it back up? Everyone's good? Okay, how many of you got 8 or more correct? 8 or more. Okay, we have a couple. How many of you got between about 5 to 7? Okay, and did anyone get 4 or less? It's okay. Now, those of you who got 8 or more, what did you do? How were you able to remember that many words?
I made it into a picture.
Oh, you
So
created
the
a
only reason
picture.
I couldn't do more is because I didn't get past the first 8.
Okay, so you just kind of focused in, created a picture, and were able to remember them, okay? How were you able to do that?
Very similar. I made it into a story. So
Okay.
there's a tiger on my vase, and I took a picture of it as a bird flew in, and there's a book.
Ooh, you got a really intricate story going on, okay? All right, now, other strategies, other things that you were able to do maybe to remember the 5 to 7 words in that group. What were you guys doing? You reciting over and over? Did anyone do the repetition? Okay, what were some other things you did?
Rhyming.
Rhyming, yeah, because there were some words that rhymed. Okay, so you saw some, relationships.
I just linked it to stuff that I know. For example, baby, I recently had a baby. We have a clock in the house. We just bought a new clock.
Because you made
so
associations,
kind of made
yes.
associations.
Yeah? Did anyone look at words that started with the same letter?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So all of those things that you did, okay, from, creating a story to repeating to associating, whatever, those are all working memory strategies, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about how do you do this in your classroom, like how do you implement this and integrate it into your lesson plans and what you're going to be doing in your classroom with your students. So these are going to be the 4 major areas that we're going to be covering today, okay? And we're going to be, the next couple slides that you're going to see are a little bit text heavy, but the reason we did that is because in your packet you had all of the slides. We wanted just to make sure you had everything. So we're not going to go over every single one, but at least you can have an idea of what it is and some actual tips on how you can implement it, okay? So we're going to start with relevancy, all right? I think we all know what relevancy is, okay? It's linking what you're teaching to how it can be used and where it kind of, happens in the real world. And I say this to every person I work with. It doesn't matter what class you're teaching. You could be teaching a developmental. You could be teaching calculus, right? It doesn't matter. Everything we teach is relevant. We just have to figure out how to do it, okay? So we're going to talk about some ways to do it, and then we're going to relate it back to the second simulation, which I think you all agreed was a little bit better simulation than the first simulation, okay? So James, how did you use relevancy?
Well, this one's kind of obvious. It was the flu, right? Everybody knows about the flu and so on. And it's actually something that I do, especially in my microbiology course. Microbiology for students that want to be into a pre-health career, like pre-nursing and so on. We're always talking about diseases, things that they're going to be interacting with. I tell them, you don't have to learn this because I'm teaching to you. I tell them, when you see your patients, you're going to be doing this. And they immediately perk up about this. When I teach general biology and biochemistry, I don't teach, oh, this is this, this is that. I tell them, tell me what's in your energy drinks. Does it really make sense now that you understand how the Krebs cycle works? So that's how I make it more interactive with the students.
And then also, like, for example, reflection is really great. Having students reflect on what was just taught. As I mentioned, I teach pre-service teachers. So a lot of the stuff that, I bring into the classroom is stuff that I, experienced when I was a school psychologist. So I'm constantly kind of saying, hey, here's a scenario. How is this relevant to what you want to do? How can you use what we just learned to solve this problem, which is a typical child you're going to have in one of your classroom environments? So reflection is great, exit slips, but also, again, consistently linking it to how it can be used in the real world. And we're all professionals. We all have a professional life. So there's ways, you kind of have to think about, how can my students use this information? Okay, so that's one. Another one, as we heard a lot today, was the concept of storytelling. And there is actually a lot of research out there about how stories can help enhance working memory. So as you know, it literally will create an image for the listener. So I'm going to tell you just a quick little story that I tell my students. So I tell them a story about how a child who has leg braces, he's an early childhood child, and the only thing he can go on the playground is the swings, because that's the only thing he can literally get on, okay? But one day, he unfortunately was punished for whatever reason. The teacher said, no, you know what? You can either sit there or you can go play on the high play equipment. Now, he can't get up on the high play equipment. okay? So in that story, we start talking about, what's appropriate punishment, what's appropriate when you have a student with disabilities when it comes to behavior management. I could go on and on and on about the concepts. But you all have that image now. And with that image, it stays with the students. They can see the child, they can feel for the child. Now they have to think about, what am I going to do if that was, I was the teacher and I had to do something about his bad behavior, okay? So again, creating stories helps to really kind of bring things to life. Do you want to talk about some ways you did it?
Yes, on simulation number 2, obviously the image of the key and the log was no pun intended, key to the whole process. So in science, we have an extra degree of difficulty because we have a lot of really complicated images, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and so on. So what I learned to do is, instead of showing something very complicated, like that slide that Todd showed this morning with gazillion little boxes, I actually make it very simple. I introduce the concept, and then over the next 3 or 4 slides, I add more detail to it. So I create an image on an image on an image. So at the end point, they see the whole picture instead of showing the whole picture first, and then there's no story to it. The second thing is that again in science, when I started teaching, there was no storytelling. It was me talking like this, and you're going to listen, right? So, but I learned that there's a lot of stories you can tell, even in math, science, and chemistry. In immunology for vaccines, instead of talking about vaccines, I talk about this story about Edward Jenner looking at smallpox when he went next door, borrowed the neighbor's children, little boy, injected him with an experimental vaccine, and then gave him a shot of smallpox. And the boy didn't die, and they all lived happily ever after. Now I tell that story, you are all, exactly, nobody here is going to ever forget how the smallpox vaccine was discovered, okay? Those are the type of stories that I come up with class.
Images speak, you've heard of this proverb, images speak 1,000 words. So what we really stress is putting a lot, either telling a story or putting a lot more pictures into, materials that you're using. Because they can remember a lot just by looking at one picture, okay? All right, repetition. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but repetition is important. I always tell my students, I'm going to beat the horse dead. I always feel sorry for that horse that keeps going to death. But it's true. You really, I know it seems redundant, but it's so important to repeat things. Remember, we have a continuum of, disabilities and abilities in our classrooms. So some students benefit from hearing things more than once. Paraphrasing is great. Say something and then say it again in a different way. It's the same concept, but again, they're hearing the information more than once. Because working memory is limited. It doesn't last forever. So you really have to activate it as much as possible. So how did you use repetition during the second simulation?
Again, what are the antigens in the influenza virus? H and N, we know that. But the other thing that I do in the whole course is when I talk about viruses, I talk about that same virus, influenza, the H and the N. Then the immunology component, I talk about the H and the N in vaccination. Then when I talk about epidemiology and pandemics, guess what I talk about? Influenza, the H, and the N. So that sort of repetition, not just in the same lecture, but throughout the course, really helps with that prior knowledge that the students have. And it really helps them, work their working
memory. Now, a couple things that we found in research, there's this thing called time repetition. So you as an educator, you time yourself. So every 5 to 10 minutes, okay, which is a small chunk of information you provide, you actually paraphrase and go back. And another thing that's great is you can have the students do that. And we're actually going to do a little version of it in a few minutes. But again, it's kind of, being mindful about how you create your lecture time and how you use it. But it is okay to stop and recap and reteach. I know we feel like as professors, a lot of us, we get on the train and you just have to go. But it's okay to stop. It's okay to get off the train. It's okay to get back on the train. You just have to figure out, how it works in your classrooms. Another thing, too, I just want to, point out is just recap. Recap is a very easy thing to do. What did we do today? What did you learn today? Let's go over these key points again, okay? So repetition is a great thing, and it's a really easy thing to do. Now, the last thing another skill that we're gonna talk about, there's a lot of great research about this, is chunking. I'm sure you guys have heard that. Basically, you take things that are similar and you create a chunk. Now, even like that phone number was an example, like 4769, you chunk it into 4769. Now, a couple things that we added to your slides, I just added it, I didn't add it to your slides, but you can feel free to add it, are graphic organizers and case studies, okay? Graphic organizers like concept maps are a wonderful thing that can help students to chunk information. You can have them fill out the concept map, okay? You're not gonna do the work for them, but again, that helps them to deeply process and activate the information. Case studies. I start most of my lectures with a case, where it's a real kind of case that I encountered as a school psychologist. But within that case are many pieces of information that are chunked. So for example, if I use that case of the boy with the braces, all I have to do is 2 months later say, okay, boy with braces, let's talk about it, boom, boom, boom. They remember the chunks because they remembered the image, but now the image is put into a nice little package with a logo on it. Okay, so again, you know, helping students to process information in a more relevant way, but again, understanding that when you have one little chunk, it's so much easier to process than when you have all these other pieces of information floating around. Okay, how did we do chunking?
So hopefully after the second simulation, you put together the concept of the antigen, the H and N's, and the antibody and so on. So you only have to remember one thing. What I do in the full course is then we talk about the other parts of the antibody molecule. So after like a week, you should see that first picture that I showed you during simulation 1, but without any words. And I give that picture to the students as a concept map, and they're able to fill in all the parts, the functions, and they chunk that information in one place. The other thing about the concept maps, I also give them concept maps, and they fill in information. And then at the end, when they ask you, one of our favorite questions that we like from students, what is our study guide for the exam? I tell them, you have it. Those are your concept maps that you did for the whole semester. So it really helps them that way.
Okay. All right, so we're going to show you guys now an example of something that I use in my classroom called a stop and write. And so I do this at the beginning of my class before I start. Sometimes I do it as a formative assessment just to see what they've already, what they're coming in with. I do it in the middle just to do a recap. And then I do it at the end, again, to kind of go over key points. So we're going to kind of model the stop and write. And again, writing is important. We know that writing is another deeper level processing. So first question, define working memory. So write down your definition of what you think working memory is. Okay, so who wants to give us their definition? What is working memory? It's your what?
Activating prior knowledge.
Okay, you activate prior knowledge to
present concept.
Yeah, to make sense and process the concepts. Yeah, so it's activating your prior knowledge, it's active processing, it's where information is still temporarily stored, but where active processing occurs. Now, we don't, this is another example of a question, you don't have to do it, but I would ask my students, draw that picture. So of Badley's model. So by doing that again, they have to, create the image that was on the PowerPoint slide. They would then obviously put to paper that image. That's another layer of processing, and hopefully then retention, into long-term memory will be increased. You don't have to do that one, but do this one though. Without looking at your notes, jot down 2 words that we just did in the memory game. So don't look at your notes though, because that's cheating. But just that memory game that I gave you a little bit ago. Put down 2 words that you remember. Does everyone have 2 words? Okay. What are your words? Baby. Okay. Baby. What else?
Tiger.
Tiger. Yeah. Vase. Teapot.
Camera.
Okay. Yeah. Camera. Now here's the thing. If you and I and all of us were to meet a week from today, and I were to say to you, "Give me 2 words," guess what? Do you think you'd be able to do it? Yes. You would. That is how powerful working memory is. If you can get it into long-term memory, it's not going to go anywhere. That's the cool part. So that's why I do this with my students, to really highlight it. I do it in the middle of the semester, and at the end of the semester we do it again. They all can at least name 1 word. And they're all like, wow, I didn't know my memory worked like that. I'm like, yeah, you should get off your cell phone. But that's another issue. Okay, so this is what we're going to do now. We're going to actually try to put some of this stuff to work, okay? So in your packets is a worksheet. So what we'd like you to do for just a few minutes is to kind of start to think about these strategies that we gave you. Now again, we only, we went over just a few of them. They're in your PowerPoint presentation. But what we'd like you to do is to finish that learning objective. So think about a future lecture that you're going to be teaching. Finish that learning objective and just come up with a couple things that you could do to teach that learning objective using working memory strategies. Okay, so we're going to give about 5 minutes or so to do that. So think about how you could use this in your future lectures or class time. Okay, so what we'd like you to do now is actually do like a traditional think, pair, share kind of thing. You guys did the thinking. So now pair up with somebody and maybe just kind of talk a little bit about, how you could use this in a future lecture, what strategies you came up with in terms of working memory. Right? And then we'll talk about it as a larger group. Okay, we would love to give you guys a lot more time. As you know, we want to make sure that we can hear from some of you in terms of how you could use these strategies. So who wants to volunteer and tell us possibly how you feel you could use this in your classrooms? What are some ways that you could do that?
We were actually talking, it depends on, I teach chemistry, depends on what subject or what material I'm covering that day. If I'm talking about significant figure, there is no amount of storytelling you can say. There is no storytelling. You gotta get to the point, it's a significant figure. But, for example, I can give you an example of what I did last week. We were drawing the loose dot structure.
Okay, you're drawing.
So, exactly. So before that, I explained to the students that this is not an easy subject. So I wrote 8 steps that I tell them it is my steps. You cannot find it anywhere. So I write them on the board. Then I ask them after that. Then I practice drawing the structure. Then I tell them to close that, grab another piece of paper, and write the steps that I told you. Do you remember what steps I told you? So write it in your own language, whatever you want it to. Then I put the questions out on the board, different structure. Then I tell them to, now you go on the board, based on the paper that you wrote, not my step, what your steps are, now answer the questions. And I get the whole entire class on the board, they go and they draw it, and then they step down, then I give a quiz. At the end of it, my style, your style, let's see what you do.
So I would say that the drawing and the organization, and you're repeating things in different formats, is definitely activating the working memory. You're not just saying, this is this, this is that, let's take a quiz.
No.
You're actually activating their memory.
Mine, I cannot. You tell me, how would you like to?
But they're also drawing.
They're drawing, yeah.
And remember, that's creating images in their minds. Okay, great example, thank you. I thought there was another hand over here. I thought, maybe, my peripheral vision's not great today. Okay, let's get some other examples. Other ways that you can use this.
I'm a full-time counselor here at Middlesex, but I also teach student success. And as one of my lectures, I'm going to bring people into the counseling services area. And in our counseling services area, we do academic, career, personal, and transfer counseling, as well as disability services and international students. So there is a lot that goes on there. One of my learning objectives is to ensure that help students learn that there are resources on campus and also resources off campus to help them succeed, but that they have to be able to access those resources on their own. So I've been their professor all semester, and I'm very clear with them throughout the semester that when I'm their professor, I am not a counselor. And actually, even if they ask for counseling, I will refer them to a colleague. I don't do that myself. So in this lecture, I thought one of the sort of a fun thing to do when they come into the counseling center is I'm going to have a different hat on. And literally, I'm going to put a hat on, and I'm going to talk about the concept of wearing 2 hats. And that standing in front of them tonight, I'm standing in front of them as a counselor. So I thought that the visualization would be good.
Absolutely. And you're also making things interesting and relevant to them too. I mean, the fact that there's other types of counseling and where do I need to go to get it? I mean, that is interesting to a lot of students. A lot of students don't know that counseling services does that. They just think, oh, it's because I have a problem.
That's right.
They don't realize that, well, maybe I have a career issue and I don't know which pathway I want to go down. So that's a great example. Thank you, Alice. Okay, why don't we just do one more share from somebody? Anybody? Thank you.
I teach Russian, and apart from memorization and repetition, I do a lot of teach back. So in the beginning of the class, I ask my students to kind of paraphrase what we learned last time, and one of the students will volunteer, walk to the board and start writing and kind of summarizing all the stuff that we learned last time.
Yeah, like a recap from last time.
Yeah, exactly. And they actually love it. They look forward to that because they don't know who exactly is gonna get a chance to teach back. And share this with the rest of the class.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, repetition is wonderful. Recapping is great. And I know when I started teaching, I always felt under the gun to get through it all. And I realize now that, wait a minute, I really need to look at what's the most important stuff that I need to teach and, be able to reteach and re-go over things, and that it's okay to stop and do something a little different.
Yeah, and also when you are able to teach it to someone else,
Yes.
you actually understand it better.
Yeah, and that's part of also, if you ever want to do a jigsaw model too, that whole expertise and then reteaching. I mean, that again is, you have to be able to, figure out which way can I get the information, but it makes it so much more meaningful. And that's that whole kind of relevancy thing. And meaningfulness also goes hand in hand with retention and long-term memory too. So, I mean, anytime you can make something stand out and make the students connect to it, it is going to be a lot more powerful for them. Okay? So, what questions do you have as we kind of, recap and kind of, close down our presentation? Do you guys have questions for us? We have a couple minutes.
I want to go back to that, the Bradley model.
Yes, Bradley's model.
Yeah, but when you mentioned about, because I understood the visual meaning of the eyes, and I understood the chronological meaning of listening.
Yep.
But when you mentioned the central executive, talking about the boss
Yep.
and the assistant, in my mind, I was looking for body parts to connect. So these are the
Well,
central-
this is going on inside of your information processing system.
like the brain would be the central executive.
Well, no, remember, there's parts of your brain that are responsible for memory.
Gotcha.
So, and then this is part of that kind of process.
Gotcha.
And so you can think of it as the boss. I mean, this part of your working memory oversees everything. Now, again, as I mentioned, there's individual differences. We know that we have students that have much stronger working memory. We know have students that have disabilities and or limitations in their working memory. So their boss may not be bossing as much or too much. Okay. Also, how the information comes in through, long-term memory, you can think of these as like tubes. I mean, some people's tubes get clogged, as we know. And we talked about cognitive load. That's a big thing. And what you already know sometimes can hurt when you're learning new information. So really what we wanted to kind of, give you is an idea that when you're delivering information, just be mindful about working memory. Be mindful that you're not giving too much information, you're not overloading what they're saying, but also, everything that we want to do has to be meaningful. And I don't know about you guys, but I get a synergy from my class when they're all bobbling their heads. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Because they're really like, yeah, I get it. So again, we want to get more of those bobbles, but we also want to make sure those gears are working simultaneously. So did that make sense for what that is? Are there other questions before we conclude? Well, thank you guys so much. I don't even know, it's going to be uploaded.
I think, yes.
Yeah, you guys have it, there's another version, or PowerPoint will be uploaded too, but you have it. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact us. We always love, talking and sharing information with our colleagues outside of Middlesex.
Thank you so much. Can we get a